in terms of actual competition with China in a more material sense than that, like competing over Taiwan or competing over the Belt and Road Initiative, right? Like feeling threatened by the Belt and Road Initiative, or for that matter, the issue of the South China Sea, navigation rights, or who various islands belong to in the South China Sea or the East China Sea. I mean, are you saying those are not? Are none of those areas that an American president focused on national interests should be concerned about?
I'm glad you used the word national interests, because the first thing you need to do when you engage in a geopolitical competition, like the one the United States has launched against China, there's no question whatsoever that the United States has launched a geopolitical contest against China. No question. The trade tariffs, the efforts to set up the Quad, the AUKUS, all these are actions
the Quad
against China.
being this group of countries: India, Japan, Australia, and the U.S., right?
Exactly.
Right.
They're all and move to sort of, in some way or another, constrain China. But of all the issues that you mentioned, the most dangerous issue in U.S. China relations is Taiwan. Because if there's one issue that can actually lead to war between the United States and China, it is Taiwan. Because there's absolutely no question, and let there be no doubts about this. If Taiwan declares independence and says it wants to become an independent country, China will declare war. It's 100% certainty, and everyone in Asia knows this. So the best thing we can do is keep the status quo, which preserves autonomy for Taiwan, and that way you avoid a war. South China Sea, there'll be no war. Absolutely
You're sure
no
of
war.
that?
Because the United States says its primary interest is to protect freedom of navigation in South China Sea. Now, the United States, as you know, is not a claimant to any territories in the South China Sea. If there's going to be a war, it could be a war between China and the Philippines, or China and Vietnam, or China and Malaysia, which is unlikely, by the way, and I'll explain why. But in the case of the United States, it says that it has an interest in freedom of navigation. And guess what? The country that has a greater interest than the United States in freedom of navigation is China. Because China trades more with the world than the United States does. So when the United States Navy keeps international waterways open, it is doing China a massive favor.
Although there is an issue over the South China Sea that was taken to an international tribunal, right? And China lost, I gather. And I thought that was about, and did not respect the ruling, as I understand it. And I thought that was about something about navigation. That wasn't about the islands, right?
It was about. I don't think it's an island per se. It's a feature, I think. And the Philippines won the case.
Right.
And China is not going to respect it. But as you know, most great powers violate international law some of the time, not all the time. And as you know, the United States has a base in Diego Garcia, which the ICJ has declared that the British ownership of the base is illegal and it should be returned to Mauritius. And neither United States nor UK are going to abide by the World Court ruling. It's not surprising. That's how great powers behave. And so China will not abide by the ruling, but China is engaged in intense private discussions with the Philippines to try and find a solution.
Okay.
And that's a problem not between the United States and China. It's a problem between Philippines and China.
Okay. So there's no real issue with freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. It exists, and China is not challenging it.
China would lose more if there's no freedom of navigation.
Right. So, okay. And as for Taiwan, it sounds to me like you're saying the less America talks about it, the better, because I've had the impression that China would just as soon live with the status quo for quite some time. I mean, its official policy is eventual reconciliation of Taiwan, integration of Taiwan. It would say back into China. It considers Taiwan to have always been part of China. But I don't think they want to invade Taiwan. And I've wondered whether the amount of rhetorical attention the United States pays to Taiwan, increases the chances of war. Makes it harder. Just arouses various forces that could cause trouble. Is that your view, that the less America talks about it, the less likely war will be?
Well, the one lesson of geopolitics is that when great powers raise human rights issues, it is only brought up when it is a convenient geopolitical weapon. So in 1971, when Kissinger went to China, and in 1972, when Nixon went to China, China was in the middle of the Cultural Revolution. The human rights abuses in China under the Cultural Revolution were off the scale. What did the United States do? It didn't see any of it. In fact, for all the years in which the United States collaborated with China, and it collaborated to the extent of putting up CIA listening stations in Xinjiang, by the way, against the Soviet Union. So today, when the United States expresses concern over Taiwan, to be honest with you, it's not because the United States cares about the people of Taiwan. It's because it's a convenient geopolitical issue to use against China and to say that China is threatening democracy. So I don't want to be too cynical, but if tomorrow the United States suddenly decided that China is very important, there's an asteroid coming down, going to hit planet Earth, and the only two countries that can fob it off is United States and China, Taiwan will disappear from the radar.
Right.
So it's all about what your interests are. And I actually think that the United States can find a better way of competing with China and not resort to this, trying to pinch China on small issues. It's much more important to work out a comprehensive, long-term strategy which says, hey, for the United States, these are my fundamental long-term interests, right? And these are your fundamental long-term interests. How do we work together?
Okay.
And we have to disagree on some issues, and there will be disagreements on some issues. How do we manage the disagreements? Because at the end of the day, it's very clear that the final solution cannot be a war. Because if you do have a war, I don't know which city you're in, but LA will disappear, San Francisco will disappear, New York City will disappear. And that's not worth anything, right? A nuclear war. So there are some issues that can trigger a nuclear war, and we want to stay clear of that.